I think the imposter syndrome is a real phenomenon, and it's not something that just happens to a minority of the people or a minority of the leaders. And so that brings me back to, okay, if it's as prevalent as the experts have found out, what can we do about it, and how can we leverage that? And I think some of the thinking, without going too much into the detail on the upside idea of an imposter syndrome, are things like you really care about your image and the quality of the work that you deliver. And that means that delivering something that can be considered sloppy or a quick fix, or I had to cut, the corners, is not something that would ever come to you. And so that means that whoever is on the receiving end of the piece of work that you're handing over to them can consider themselves to be very lucky in that they will get a work that is really thought through and well, established at the time of the handover.
Hi, thank you for joining us, Navid. This is Technology for Change podcast, where we discuss how change is made through technology in this disruptive space. And I'm joined today by a top executive coach in this region, as well as author of Mastering Executive Transitions, and somebody who's had 20 years of corporate experience, as well as so much more under your belt. You're basically coaching the leading executives in this region. So very interesting to have you here. I've gone through your profile, and it's been sort of a ride, to as a executive myself. It was one of those things where I look at it and I go, wow, you've done a lot, and you've recently made a transition from corporate to kind of going into executive coaching full time. So tell me a little bit about how you ended up here. Did you, as a kid, did you see yourself being an executive coach? Like, what drives you? Why this field?
Sure. Abeer, first off, thank you for the kind invitation. You're making me blush now by calling me the top executive coach in the region. I just want to point out that I work globally. So I have been working also in Europe, in the US, and in other regions. But yes, it's been an incredible journey to transition from a full-time executive role and a little bit of coaching on the side into a full-time coaching practice. And of course, with the benefit of hindsight, we're always smarter than we thought of ourselves to be. But I think it's been an incredible journey for me, and it really feels like a complete journey, having spent 26 years in large corporates and having had the good fortune of working for some of the world's most admired companies. I've certainly learned a few lessons along the way.
Interesting. And what drives you? Why do you do this?
Yes. So this started many years back, and this is a true story. So I worked in the human resources function, in the people function, for just over 20 years after 26 years of corporate experience. And this is many years back, probably 12, 13 years back now. I was leading a talent review conversation. This is a succession planning type meeting where you invite the divisional directors and the CEO of the business, and you talk about who could be considered for what position in the near future. And so whilst it sounds like a bit of a theoretical exercise, you actually have to be quite realistic with it, because executives move on, sometimes on their own, sometimes with the desire to move into something bigger within the organization. And so I remember one particular gentleman being discussed in the room quite controversially. So somebody was seeing his name and suggesting that he will never become a GM in their business. So this is a divisional president making the case against a candidate. And two of the other gentlemen jumped in and made very similar comments about the individual, said, sorry, I just can't see how he would really be an effective GM. So the output of the conversation was that he's definitely not, ready in the near term or even in the long term. And because he was a high performer though, so he was delivering his numbers, he was a sales leader, we could look into an executive coaching engagement for him to see if there's anything that can be done by that. And I kid you not, a year later, we are sitting in the same talent review meeting with almost the same incumbents in the role. and people are fighting in which division he should become a GM. As in, I want him. No. I think he would much better suit my division. So my curiosity started around the topic of what actually happened in this 1 year when this gentleman, who was arguably a high performer, not necessarily considered as a top talent, just sat with another person in the room about 20 times in that 1 year time period. How was he able to transform his leadership, his style and impact in such a profound way that, you know, the detractors of his career have become his promoters? And so that was my kind of curiosity around the topic. And of course, the rest is history. So when I decided to go and embark on this journey to become an executive coach myself, I spoke to many, many amazing coaches. I spoke to many people in my professional network who were HR directors and had worked with coaches previously. And through those interviews and conversations, I decided which track is right for me. And I decided to go on quite a long journey to become a coach. So it was a 3-year track across 3 continents, but I wouldn't want to do it any other way now.
Wow, thank you for that example. That was very enlightening. I think I wish I'd been a fly on the wall at that time when this conversation happened. So that kind of leads into my second question. Having sort of coached directly or indirectly thousands of people in your corporate experience as well as, you know, in your own practice, are there some ingredients that you've seen in people that make them tick different, that make them amazing coaches? Like from what you described earlier, it felt like that person potentially had the ingredients. It just needed to be pointed out to him. So what are those basic things where you're sitting in front of a person and you're like, wow, okay, this guy could do it. Whether he wants to or not, that's a different story. And maybe I can help him. What if you just were to take a gander?
Yes. So my way of thinking about the same question is to look for qualities rather than ingredients. And the qualities can differ. The qualities can be sometimes also a little bit hidden inside a leader. Sometimes there may not be a high level of awareness that this exists. But there is a fantastic book just been published by 2 of my fellow coaches in my network, Jacqueline Lane and Scott Osman. I would just want to plug this in. It's called Becoming Coachable. And it really looks at exactly this topic, which is there are about 1,000 books on how to be an effective coach, how to be an incredible coach, how to become the best coach, and so on. There is very few material available on the topic of, if I'm an executive and I want to maximize the impact that I get from my coaching engagement, what are the kind of things that I can do? Now, I won't be able to, open up the entire book here in this conversation, but I just wanted to point out that there is guidance and professional guidance out there that leaders can seek, even as someone who's on the receiving end of the coaching. Now, back to your initial question, I think my kind of humble formula around this quality is curiosity, openness, and a degree to want to test things out, right? I have found the combination of those 3 to really help an executive to really make 10 times improvements versus a 2-fold improvement. And it really goes into the same thinking that, look, I could hire myself a personal trainer. I want to become a little bit, more in shape. I want to look after my body and so on and so forth. If I were to pick up the support of the best personal trainer in the world once a week, and all I do is that 1 hour that we have together, give my best, and the rest of the week I would be, drinking like mad, having lots of sugary drinks, having a diet that is more junk food than healthy foods, and, be sleep deprived and work hard and play hard and do all the things that are actually not good for me. Well, guess what? Even though I have hired the world's best personal trainer, what I'm going to get out of that relationship is quite limited. But guess if I were to go all in, right? If I were to open up to the idea of having a personal trainer is not just that 1 hour a week, if I wanted to really maximize the investment that I'm making in myself, what are the kind of things I would be open to explore? And some of those may work well for me, and some of those may be an idea worthwhile a try, but actually not good for me. But that is what gives me a much higher return on the investment. And the same applies to coaching. If I come to my coach and I am very courteous, I am kind of listening and I'm taking everything in, but I don't go back to my regular work environment and I don't test and try out some of the ideas that we have discussed, obviously in a safe way, then I'm going to get incremental value from this coaching. So that would be kind of my way of responding to a question. It's, it takes two to tango, as the English saying goes. And it really is true when it comes to the topic of executive coaching.
Wow, that's interesting. And that kind of, so when you mentioned that, being coachable and sort of having that all in kind of an attitude, and then additionally, having their curiosity, those components. I want to kind of, and I'm taking a tangent because I'm looking at it from a different angle. When a business is sort of, and I know that most of your clients are big corporates and stuff, but you've had experiences in smaller companies that have been scaling and have drastically scaled. We in our company we call it structured chaos. One thing that kind of always bothers me is when we're looking at executive transitions, right? So the CEO of a company, when they're an early stage startup, to a CEO of a company that is at a massive level, probably a corporate, could potentially be either two different people or the same people, but in either case, they're not intrinsically the same people. How do you see, so, I mean, I guess the first tangent to this question would be whether, does that change happen? Like, how do you sort of identify that change? Where, the executives are the ones that are actually stopping the growth of the company and they need to transition. And secondly, whether that transition has to happen intrinsically within that leader, or that transition has to happen externally with bringing somebody else in. So, tell me, how would you sort of identify this process?
Yes. So first off, you're correct by pointing out that roughly 80% of the clients that come to do the work with me are senior executives in large corporates. And that being said, about 20% of them are working in organizations that can't be considered corporate. Sometimes they are kind of middle-sized organization on the way to become a corporate, or they're really at an early stage and are looking to scale up or look to do an IPO or some other plan to grow the organization substantially. And these companies are often backed by a private equity firm or a venture capital fund. And of course, there's a different degree of pressure usually mounting on the CEO and the organization as such. What I have found to be helpful is the analogy of, if you have a CEO who has been very successfully taking the company from A to B, and this CEO has been delivering, and now for whatever reason that CEO is struggling, there's two or three different ways you could handle the situation if you are the majority shareholder. So you could say, this role has clearly outgrown our CEO, so we need to go and look for a new CEO. That's scenario one. Scenario number two is, well, we are not sure if this current CEO has what it takes to lead the next 3 years for this organization. How about we do an external assessment of some sort to give us a little more validated quality output and input data on what we believe he's really made of, or she. And thirdly, if they really believe, and there's sometimes a founder spirit that is part of that organization, they don't want to really kind of damage it or risk it, because we all saw what happened when the CEO of a very important AI company was asked out by the board of directors. You saw what, I forgot the percentage, but something like 90% of the employees threatened to resign if he were not to be reinstated. So these things can be real. And so what I've often found is that either it's a combination of the assessment and the third scenario, which is supporting him with a coach, or it's right away to supply the coach and really see if there is the possibility for the CEO to grow at the same rate or higher than the role is growing and the organization is growing on him. And so whichever case, I think the first scenario is probably the most ruthless method you can think of. But the reality is, depending on how firmly the shareholder believes that there is a change required, they will probably go ahead and make it happen. But what I want to point out is that there is professional qualified support for exactly this topic, which is the transition coaching, that is available to every single one of those CEOs out there. And those firms, if they wanted to save their investment or grow their investment, I think that's a bit of a no-brainer to think about a professional qualified support for that leader.
Right. And is this, so, your book about mastering executive transition, how deeply do you get into this?
Yes. So the book is obviously helpful. And the reason I wrote the book is actually because the 7-phase model that I call the double diamond framework of executive transitions is a proven and a reliable framework to put into practice. So what I didn't want to is to write a beautiful book that is theoretically very much grounded, and that's about it. What I wanted to do as someone who has spent 26 years of his life working in large corporates is to have something that is theoretically grounded but practically applicable.
Right.
And this is why, today I have more and more coaches who actually read my book with a view to apply some of those frameworks into their own coaching practice with their clients. Because up until my book was launched, there wasn't really a framework for transitioning at the very top. There's this very popular concept called The First 90 Days, which is a book that's been very successful. It's written by a professor. And that book works for roughly 95% of the population in a company, especially for first-time managers. But what can be the most effective way to onboard for a first-time manager can't be the same effective way to transition for the group CEO. Right. That was my idea, that I wanted to write something that is much more comprehensive and speaks to the reality of what it takes to lead at the very top of an organization.
Interesting. And one of the things that I found really interesting while researching you was, some of the shorts that you'd done, as well as some of the conversations that you'd had about imposter syndrome and, some other sort of mindset related topics that are in generally seen as things that pull you back, but you had an interesting concept, which was very different. And I want to kind of dive into that because, I've recently gotten to know that I have ADHD. Didn't really care much about it, but it does help to understand how that drives my decision making and how to be more productive. So, your opinion with imposter syndrome is that it could be a superpower. It kind of allows you to accomplish things that most people would not. So, how much of mindset do you think plays into leadership? And, how much of that makes you go after the big, hairy goals that we were just talking about earlier? Mm-hmm. And is that, is that something that, we should lean into or, lean away from?
Sure. So first off, as a published author, I would like to cite the original source of this. So this is Adam Grant, who spoke about this phenomenon in his book, one of his books, to say that somehow it seems like the imposter syndrome is something you need to cut off and put away with. And the reality is, if you really think hard about it, there are some real upsides to the imposter syndrome, as well as there are downsides. And that was the thought that I took over in one of these podcasts. I just want to be mindful that this is not my original thinking or something that came to me in a Zen moment after meditation in an early morning. So there are some real upsides to having what is called imposter syndrome. And by the way, when I was writing my book, the research I found on the exact same topic And if we were to include the imposter syndrome in our life, not just related to our work, then this is the Psychological Society in Australia. They've done this study. They found that something like 70% of the adult population have come across what can be considered imposter syndrome at one point, at least in their life. And so I think it's most visible when you see, and I certainly saw that when I was taking my first driver's license, right? The practical thing, which is like you are now in a car, you are driving on a real street, and the instructor is watching every single move of yours, right? Boy, I've never felt more imposter in my life than I have in that moment. Although I had 12 hours of, lessons, and I had all the theory, and I passed that, so on. And so I think the imposter syndrome is a real phenomenon, and it's not something that just happens to a minority of the people or a minority of the leaders. And so that brings me back to, okay, if it's as prevalent as the experts have found out, what can we do about it, and how can we leverage that? And I think some of the thinking, without going too much into the detail on the upside idea of an imposter syndrome, are things like you really care about your image and the quality of the work that you deliver. And that means that delivering something that can be considered sloppy or a quick fix or I had to cut the corners is not something that would ever come to you. And so that means that whoever is on the receiving end of the piece of work that you're handing over to them can consider themselves to be very lucky in that they will get a work that is really thought through and well, established at the time of the handover. That's the first thing. And if you were to do some research into the medical field, for instance, again, I'm not an expert, but there are a lot of studies suggesting that when there are big mistakes happening in patient care, so this is someone who is a patient in a hospital or in a clinic and getting the wrong dosage of, the medicine that they're supposed to get, or getting the wrong medicine, or, having some complication, you see that those clinics and hospitals and kind of medical facilities that have the lowest failure rates or error rates are those that put in a lot of care into making sure that every part of this process is really done with a very conscientious mindset and a high diligence, almost as if this is a control tower of an airport or a nuclear power plant. And so it's not just, the nurse mixed up the ingredient and, okay, so that mistake happened. It usually takes a lot more than that. It's about how the medicine was labeled when it was first received. It's about the person that sometimes they have to chop it up and, distribute it in different bottles and so on and so forth. If they did their job right by making sure that the right amount is being put into the bottle and so on and so forth. So it takes more than one individual or one issue to get to that. But the reality is you can also look at it as an upside. So that was just one example of how, being labeled as an imposter or having thoughts that can be considered the imposter syndrome can actually have a real benefit to the organization and to the customers of that organization.
That's brilliant. I think I never really looked into it that way. Thank you for taking that deep dive. I would be remiss if I didn't really go into what makes this podcast different for us. Is because it's grounded into entrepreneurship and you being an entrepreneur yourself now. I want to kind of take in one of the things that you said in the podcast, which was while writing your book, you did not have that 1 year hiatus where you disappeared and, had the time. And not only were you struggling with everything that was going around you, but you had your baby was born as well at the same time, and you still managed to get the book done. And then, with a tremendous amount of corporate experience under your belt, you could have easily just kept going, right? Like it was a good career path, but you managed to take the risk and get out and do your own thing now. What do you feel about, that philosophy about when the time is right, which most entrepreneurs struggle with, when is the time right for them to quit their job and start their own thing? And you know, is it? I mean, I know you would probably say that the timing is not the case, but what is it then that stops most people from pursuing their dream, like you have yourself at this point?
Oh, wow. I wish we didn't bring this topic up. So first off, yes, it's very true that I happen to know individuals who took a year out, went on a lonely island, meditated every day, and came back with a beautiful manuscript and got the book published. I just did not have that luxury. So I, in those 7 years that I wrote this wonderful book, I did do 3 jobs in 3 countries, in 2 companies. And shortly after deciding to write the book, our son was born. So it's true that, as I call it, life just gets in the way, right? I was a busy exec, I was coaching on the side, and I had this wonderful idea to want to write a book. And I didn't want to write just a book, but I wanted to write a book that hopefully one day is considered thought leadership. So my bar, my own bar for my own book was set very, very highly. Now, coming back to how I knew that the timing is right for me. So first off, I had been coaching on the side for something like 10 years. So I knew that I really, really enjoyed doing the work. And not only that, I had many, many happy clients who were very happy with the outcomes that they were able to achieve as a result of our work. And so it wasn't really the idea of, oh, one day I wake up and think, how would I become a coach and do just coaching? So it was like a mini plant that I had been nurturing for about 10 years. 2 things happened. One, I felt on the 50th of my 5-year in the last role I did for a company called Vodafone. And it was a wonderful company, and it was an amazing role. I was globally in charge of the HR function for the finance function. And so that included 27,000 employees scattered across 24 markets. I was partnering with the group CFO, who happens to be group CEO today, so she's been promoted. And it was a really full-on demanding role. And so the coaching was something that was happening on the side. The 2 things that happened for me were, first, I really felt after 26 years, on my 50th of the 5 years in that role, that the journey for me was complete. It really felt, and I don't say that from a place of arrogance or anything like that. I really felt that there isn't much left for me to learn. In an HR role, in an organization, I had ticked in my own book everything that I wanted to ever do. The second thing that I felt was also right for me, and that really led me to make the jump, was that my book had been published for about 6 months. And it really went from strength to strength. I mean, on the day it was published, it became a #1 new release on Amazon. And that was a surprise, I think, not just for me, but certainly also for my publisher. And then within a week, it became a bestseller in America, in the US, where I had less than 10% of my total clients. Within 3 weeks after that, it became a bestseller in the UK, in Germany, in Switzerland, and by now in many more markets. So these are the 2 indications that I had. One is there is definitely a different shelf life and life outside of corporate. And the book just opened doors to me. I mean, I have done now, I think this is my 24th podcast in 18 months, right? And I don't even have an agent. I don't have a PR agent. I don't have anything like that. It's all inbound interest that I am getting as a result of the book. And it really offers the best conversation starters for me when I am meeting new clients, new organizations, prospective clients, because it's something interesting to talk about. So what I decided then to do is, it really was, if not now, when?
Right.
If everything seems to be aligned around me, and I had a wait list for my coaching. Wow. Because I can only coach 2 or 3 people at a time. I'm very busy with my day job. And I'm a husband, I'm a father, and so on. So it really felt like, all the struggle and all the pain, all the imposter of trying to write the book, ultimately resulted in an incredible book that I am most grateful for. And that book is now opening doors for me and opening new possibilities for me. So it took a little bit of a plunge. It took a little bit of okay, what if this didn't work? Really, I mean, sitting down with my wife and pondering about what if this really did not work out? Well, guess what? A year or two from now, I can always go back to corporate, right? I know how to do it. I know that it feeds us as a family. I know that I am good at it. I know that I've been successful at it many, many times over. So if that really didn't work out, well, you can always go back. But boy, it worked out, and it's so well worked out that I didn't even look back. And the rest is history.
Wow, that's yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot of similarities there, but I think like I want to kind of, obviously when you're an entrepreneur, it's not always roses, right? There's always struggles. There's always things that happen. Even if one as successful as you, what are some of the pitfalls? What are things that you did not consider when you were sort of planning this out? You know, you're very strategic in your approach. But I feel like entrepreneurship does take people by surprise when they get into it. So what are some of the things that you felt that were different, good different, bad different from your role in corporate?
Yes. So first off, allow me by saying that I really wish I had that strategic foresight 10 years ago to say, you know what, or 12 years ago, 10 years from now, I will jump ship from the big corporate ladder. I'm going to establish my own coaching practice. I will move our family to a new region, and I will become the number one coach in the world. I had no clue whatsoever. I mean, literally 12 years ago, I hadn't even started my coach training, right? And so I want to put away with this mystery that, some people have this strategic foresight and others unfortunately don't have it, right? I didn't have any of it whatsoever. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to say is talking about the struggle you mentioned, right? So in 6 years, and this is a very, it's a topic I haven't very much spoken about. In 6 years of aiming to write the book, I had produced about 60 pages of work, right? Now, in my own mind, that's not a book. So after 6 years, I was thinking, okay, how about I publish this thing as a white paper and just be done with it? Because if I continue at the current run rate, it will take me another 15 years to write the book. I just don't have enough time left in my life to do that.
Right.
So, and the other funny anecdote is Twitter, or now X. If you look at what I actually produced, those 60 pages over the 6-year time period, I produced less than a tweet a day, right? And so you can say that's horrendous. That at this run rate, it will take you another 20 years or 15 years to write the book. Now, one thing came to me one day, and that was like, I seem to be really struggling to write this book. How about I work with someone like a coach that has helped others to finish their book,
Right.
who are wannabe authors, who are aspiring authors, who have amazing ideas, but for whatever reason aren't really able to be productive and creative at the same time. And in that 6 months time period, and I have to make a plug for Eric Costa and his program that he runs. He's a professor at Georgetown University, and he helps wannabe authors become published authors. Not only did I produce another 180 pages that together with the 60 pages became an actual book, but I was really feeling that the quality of this book is what I expect it to be.
Wow.
So, and again, that brings me back to seeking professional guidance and support. You know, you can put yourself and mind and energy into anything and you will succeed. Or if you want to be faster, quicker, better, 10 times what you would achieve on your own, there's at least one person out there that can help you achieve that.
Wow.
And that was my realization, arguably a very late realization. But I'm glad I did that, and I would always recommend anyone in any field in their life, if they have a go, and I certainly tried. I tried for 6 years. I just wasn't making enough progress. It was so abysmal that I thought I might as well just publish the damn thing and be done with it. But I'm glad I didn't. So the perseverance really helped me. Coming back to what you said, what did help you? The resilience helped me to, I'm a very ambitious guy, generally speaking. I have resigned twice in my life without having a new job lined up. And my family, certainly my parents at the time, declared me crazy because there were no push factors involved. Right. So why not just hang in there and look for an alternative role? And as and when you find something more exciting, you just, say goodbye. But you see, we are all different, and that was my way, and that's how I did it. But I'm glad that I did take the plunge. I'm glad that everything that I had in my mind came true and more. And so for me, it's been an incredible ride. And I'm 18 months into my full-time coaching practice. So I've still a lot more to give to this and a lot more to gain as well.
Wow. Well, I'll definitely be watching out for that. I mean, risk taker and ambition and all those things. I think these are key ingredients that I look at when, we're investing in businesses ourselves. And I think, you've personified all of that with the experience that you shared. And I'm pretty sure that's going to be going much, much further. But let's kind of take a, dive into, So I think, when you're coaching these executives, these are very interesting times that we're living in. With the, you mentioned Sam Altman in OpenAI and some of the other things that are happening in technology. How much does, these disruptions affect, the executive's role in the, the today that we know now? And how do you coach them to be more open to change? Like, if you're in a leading organization, executives are always watchful of what's out there. But in this situation, nobody knows what is out there, and it's very stressful, I'm assuming. How do you sort of, put that into your perception that tomorrow things could be completely different, and then still be able to, get ahead with everyday, progress?
Yes. So the first thing I want to say is that the term VUCA was coined over 20 years ago. And boy, if that felt like a new thing 20 years ago, it certainly didn't a few years after the term was coined. And I think what the term that I use in my book is polycrisis, right? So I say, if you're an executive leader and you consider yourself to have this executive armor, this shield that you're carrying, there are about 10 bullets fired at you, left, right, and center, that you have to deal with. So just because change is happening doesn't mean that you have the luxury of ignoring it or not really go with it. I think that the real choice and option you have is how to deal with it. And what is it that will put you a little further ahead of your competitors in the market space? So I don't think that this question of, can I be change friendly or go in line with the change is really a question anymore. So and so that brings us back to what really helps. I mean, the notion that I like to work with my executive leaders, so I call it maximizing leadership impact. Or if I wanted to explain it to my 8-year-old son, it's to be the best at becoming better. Nobody has the answer out there. Nobody knows what the next quarterly result will really look like. And I say this with a high level of respect because I worked with the finance function of a FTSE 10 company for 5 years, and I was involved in every single of those leadership team meetings. And despite all the sophistication and all the thought and belief that went into forecasting numbers. The reality is always outside of even what you thought could happen. And so with that in mind, if there is one surviving methodology I could recommend to anyone, is to becoming the best at becoming better. It doesn't mean that you will be the number one in your marketplace all the time. It doesn't mean that you're going to kill the competition out there, because they may have some IP or some ways of working or some spirit or a brand or a combination of all these assets that puts them ahead of you. But boy, look at Toyota, look at all these companies. If you become the best at becoming better, ultimately you will outcompete every single one out there. And so that's the other part of what I do as a coach, which is what I love doing. Roughly 20% of the coaching work that I do is with executive leadership teams. So it works entirely differently. It's not, let's say if you have a top team of 12 individuals, I coach every single member of the team for a year, because that's what I would normally do. But what I do is I work with the entirety of a leadership team using 2 psychometrics, 2 assessments, and 2 offsites, and some coaching in between. And the basic ambition about that journey is exactly that. How can we as a team leverage our impact? Because it doesn't matter which field that is competitive you look into, whether it's football, whether it's ice hockey, whether it's basketball, whether it's, Hollywood, right? If you wanted to look at it as a competition, buying or hiring the best player gives you a 15 to 25% likelihood of winning the cup or the medal or the Oscar. But having an effective team that is able to leverage on each other's strength and is strategically aware of its downsides and development areas will give you a chance to succeed 75 to 85% of the time. And so that's really the ultimate game, right? You can work on an individual and you can give them the best that you have, and they are super responsive and they take it all up. That's how much they can take the company forward. But imagine the entire leadership team being in the same position. That's where you make, significant gain and not incremental gain.
Wow, that's I think that gives. I think as an entrepreneur, for me to think a lot about in terms of the interconnectedness of coaching. That's generally not what you kind of consider when you're looking at an executive coach. I think when most companies look at it, it's more of an individual performance rather than a team performance. But you're right, like the sum is greater than, the individual parts, and that makes more sense. I want to dive into a little bit, because we've discussed a lot of things in this podcast. We've discussed initially about the different frameworks that are existing that you've defined in your book about transitioning executives and frameworks of sort of looking into problem identification, sort of scaling up your performance and things like that. So understanding that 80% of our clients are going to be corporates, and most of the entrepreneurs out there, it will take some time for them to get to that point. What is it that they can learn now for them to sort of start to become more coachable eventually when they reach out to you? And are there any frameworks out there that they can get help from when they're sort of looking into these aspects of transition, or sort of what should be the next step for them to climb the ladder, or what's stopping them, whether it's themselves that's stopping? Because like for me, coaching is essentially you acknowledging that you need to get out of your own way and then sort of become the best at getting better. Very aptly put, by the way. So are there things out there that these people can sort of assess and identify that they're ready now?
Yes.
And I guess to sort of transition to the next part, which is how do they get in touch with you, and what is the expectation that they need to have when they start to work with you?
So first off, allow me by saying that anyone listening to this podcast is welcome to connect with me either through LinkedIn or any other means, and I will send them a coach assessment toolkit, which is what I developed about 10 years ago.
Wow.
And this is a real struggle that I had, because as an HR leader, you are often the gatekeeper for bringing into the company the external coaches. You have a leader that needs a coach, and now everyone looks to you to make sure that you bring in the right coach for this one leader here. And so what I used to do is to ring up fellow HR directors to say, hey, I have a executive coaching client, and the development topic is this. Do you happen to know any coaches that you could recommend to me? And then I would be grateful for that. That's certainly one way of vetting a coach, to make sure, at least from what my peers telling me in this company, other than mine, is that they are decent and they have been able to achieve very good results for their clients. But let's face it, there's no guarantee that the same thing is going to happen with this one executive in this one organization. So what I developed then is a toolkit. I called it the golden criteria for selecting a coach that's right for you. And in that, there are 10 criteria that I lay out, and I won't be covering all of them. But essentially what I want to say with that is that, if I am looking for a coach myself, and I have been coached many times throughout my life, if I consider this person to be the best coach for me, that person may not be the best coach for you. Actually, it may be detrimental to what you are looking to achieve, right? And so again, applying the top 10 criteria will make sure that you get checked on, the ultimate attributes of what people should be looking for. What are the kind of things they can check against to make sure that the coach that they select is right for them. The second thing I want to say that most people don't know about is coaches offer free so-called chemistry conversations. That is really sitting in a room or doing a virtual session where for 30 to 45 minutes, you can ask a prospective coach anything that's on your mind and share maybe one or two of the ideas you have around the topics that you would like to be coached on. And if the coach is game, you can get a bit of a taster in that same session from the coach to really assess for yourself, is this something that gives me confidence to want to work with this coach, yes or no? Because coaching is a highly personalized matter. And that means that you better have great chemistry with this one person, because you will spend a lot of time in the next 6 to 12 months with them. And you might as well not just pick the expert, but pick someone you can really feel that you can open up to, that you can be vulnerable with, and that you can really trust that whatever they have to work with you on is really from a good place and effective to what you want to achieve as a desired outcome. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say comes back to the idea of, look, not everybody needs a coach. I actually have had executive leaders who have come to me to say, oh, someone in my team needs a coach. And then just listening what they are describing to me, I would say, I'm sorry, but I have to disagree. What I have just heard sounds more like a training need. What I have just heard sounds like a mentorship need, right? So you have to really be clear, what is the topic that you want to develop on? And is coaching the first modality of support? If it's the case, fantastic. Then you can go on and apply the top 10 criteria to make sure that the coach that you are speaking with, that ultimately you hire or the company hires on your behalf, is the perfect one for you.
That's pretty interesting. There's a different way of looking at it. Generally, I think it's a decision that you take on without looking at these different criteria. So I think that could definitely be helpful. So as the top coach in the world now, it's hard to imagine, like just 18 months and you've already achieved this status. Like, what's next? Where do you go from here?
Yes. So what I want to say is twofold. So first off, it is incredibly humbling if anyone decides to put you into that, cover and name you the number one coach in the world. Doesn't really matter who it is and what magazine, but it's just an acknowledgement of your work. Personally, though, I think as wonderful as it is, and of course CEO today, is very generous, and I apparently am the only 2 times winner of this award. What I want to say is the real proof in the pudding is what clients have to say about the outcomes that they were able to achieve as part of the coaching engagement. And even more important, what people have to say that are working with those leaders, right? So in 23 and 22, 50% of my clients were CEOs. And I think, quite frankly, the CEO Today nomination and award actually helped also with that. So, because that's what they read, right? And if the magazine says this is the number one coach in the world, well, I might as well have a conversation with him if I am in need of working with a coach. And so it's wonderful and it's great, but really it all boils down to not just what the individual says about what fantastic achievements they have been able to get to, but it's what those around them are saying about them. There's this thing called reputation, and I really, really believe in that. Because if I can give you a guarantee, if I were to just sit down with a leader and ask them about their strength and their development areas, I would get a list of very interesting items. But how about I go and validate that in a qualitative 360 confidential interview with people who are working with them as peers, with someone who is their senior, their line manager, and a set of their direct reports. And if they all say the same thing, amazing. But the reality is, and I've done many 360s on behalf of my clients, there's always at least 1 or 2 angles that you may not be aware of as a leader. And that's why applying the right tools for the right clients really makes sure that you are able to, tenfold the output that you get from a coaching rather than just blindly following some framework or something that you have read somewhere.
Perfect. That's pretty awesome. So, considering your time in terms of how limited you are with the leadership that you're working with right now, and the schedule that you maintain, how can people still get in touch with you? Are there more podcasts that they should watch out for? Is there like an educational course that is on the horizon? Like, how do they get more of you without, waiting for like years and years in the line?
So first off, I'm very friendly on social media, and LinkedIn is my go-to social media platform.
Okay.
It's the same name, Navid Nazemian, and I am actually the person who's dealing with the LinkedIn account. I don't have a VA or an assistant that's managing my LinkedIn profile on my behalf. So it's all genuine, and I'm very friendly, and I'm usually very good with responses. That's the first place I would check, if I was to get in touch with myself. And then above and beyond that, of course, I travel a fair bit. I am based out of Dubai. I continue to work globally. I have clients in Europe, in the UK, here in the region. And so, if I know that I'm going to London in 2 weeks' time, and somebody is based in London and they wanted to see me in London, and if time permits, we might as well grab a coffee and have a conversation. But I would say LinkedIn is probably the number one platform to connect with me on.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for giving us the time today, Navid, and loads of interesting conversations and things that we're going to be sharing with the users, and look forward to having you again sometime.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.